In this demonstration, we shall be creating an EventBridge rule for Amazon ECS. We want to monitor changes that happen within ECS, which is Elastic Container Service. So to do that, we click on the create rule and then we type the name of the rule. So for this example, let's call it ECS event. Okay. Description is pretty much optional, and then we go to event pattern. Now in event pattern, we're going to be doing something unique because the kind of event we want to monitor is not readily available by default within EventBridge. So we wrote a custom event which is available in the GitHub repository right here. The link is in the chapter for this book. So we're going to copy this and use this particular event for it. So we'll paste it on custom pattern, and then we're allowed to make changes to the custom pattern here. So I'm going to paste what I just copied, and we are using the ARN, which is the Amazon resource name for our ECS cluster. And then what kind of event are we checking? We are checking for a deployment state change. So if there's any deployment that happens, or deployment fails, or any kind of changes that happen in the deployment, this event is going to trigger and send us a notification. So this can be very good when you are using ECS in production actively and a deployment happens in your ECS cluster and the deployment fails, okay, or the deployment was successful. So you will need to get a notification to know the status of that particular deployment, and this EventBridge setup can help you in achieving that. So the next step here is to continue down. Okay, we'll leave the event boss to still be AWS default event, and then we pick an SNS topic that will notify us of this status. So we're going to use spot alert. You can create a unique name for your SNS topic. Like I said, I just called mine spot alert and I attached an email to that. So whenever I use this topic anywhere, it just sends an email of that information I need into that particular email address. So whatever you call your topic doesn't really matter. It is what is configured behind the SNS topic. And for this example, my email is configured there. So wherever I use it, even if I use it twice, it's going to send the event pattern of the status into that same email. So the name of the topic doesn't really matter so much. You can decide to use different names for different events, okay, or use a generic name. You can just say maybe alerter, so that anything that has to do with alerts, you push that information, that event, over to that SNS topic. Okay, and when that is done, we click on create topic. Create event. Hi, so in this demonstration, I'll be talking about how to activate Container Insights from CloudWatch. So Container Insights is supposed to help us give us a lot of insights into our container services, such as Amazon EKS Kubernetes service, Amazon ECS, that's the Elastic Container Service. So now we are here at the CloudWatch dashboard. So the first thing you need to do is to navigate to your CloudWatch dashboard. After that, you move straight into Container Insights, and from Container Insights, you go into the home page of Container Insights. So it says a fully managed observability service for monitoring, troubleshooting, and alarming on containerized applications and microservices. So the next thing we need to do here is to click on Enable on New ECS Cluster. Enable on New ECS Cluster. So we click on ECS on that, and it takes us straight into the settings page where we can activate Container Insights. So you can see a bunch of information here. We just scroll down to the bottom of the page and we can see CloudWatch Container Insights and some description of how it works. So to activate it, we're going to tick on this and click on the save button. It's going to ask us to confirm. Choose confirm to update your account settings. The new ARN resource ID may affect infrastructure tools and software updates. Make assumption about ARN on ID length. So if we're sure of the changes we want to make, if you don't have any running resources, it won't really cause any much of damage to it. So I click on confirm, and that will automatically activate Container Insights. So what this means is that anytime we deploy on ECS, it's going to automatically help us to start pushing metrics and logs over into Amazon CloudWatch. So now that we have that activated, we can always click on View Performance Dashboards for us to see CPU, memory, network utilization. By default, this always selects EKS clusters, but if we have an ECS cluster running, we can always select the ECS cluster to get information about CPU, memory, network utilization. We can also go to the ECS instances. So ECS runs in two formats. We have the Fargate, which is the serverless, and then we also have the instance type of running ECS cluster. So if we have EC2 instances running in our ECS cluster, this option helps us to see what is going on with this metrics of the EC2 instances running behind the ECS cluster. And then we also have the ECS services, okay, to get information about the services that are running, network behavior and network information that is relevant for the cluster. Thank you. So in this demonstration, we're going to show how to activate logging for our Kubernetes cluster on Amazon EKS. So to do that, we should have a cluster running. So I'm going to go to clusters. We are creating the EKS console. So I'll go to clusters. Another clusters, I have a cluster running here. So I'll click on the cluster, and these are all the information that are within the cluster. But my focus here is on activating logging for the control plane and features around the control plane of the master node of the Kubernetes cluster. So to do that, we'll go straight into logging, and under logging we can see different components of the master node. We can see the scheduler, we can see the control manager, the API server, audit, and authenticator. So if we're going to activate any of logging for any of these components, we come here to manage logging and click on manage logging, and we can see we have the option here to activate whatever we want to activate. So let's say we want to activate login for the API server. We're going to move this over to enable, and it's already enabled here. If we're going to if we want to activate any other one, we click the same enable, but we just want to activate for the API server. And when we are done with that, we click on save changes. So this is going to take a couple of while before it becomes activated. So we'll give it a couple of seconds, and then we'll return and check out if it is fully activated. Okay, we can see here now that it's actually activated, and the login update is here. This is back to becoming active because it was in progress when it was still activating. Now that we have the logs activated, we'll be able to view these logs only from the CloudWatch console. So we're going to navigate to CloudWatch from services, go to CloudWatch. Now that we are in the CloudWatch console, we'll navigate straight to logs. Under logs, we'll go directly to log groups. Under log groups, we should find the log group that has been automatically created because we activated the login for that particular cluster. And this is the cluster name, Ferocious Sculptor. We'll click on the log group, and under the log group, we're going to have different log streams. So we can pick any of the log streams here. So we click on this, and we can see the logs of the API server that we just activated. This is a bunch of the logs here showing activity, created a cluster rule binding, created this, all the activities based on what we just activated. Thank you very much. In this demonstration, I'll be showing us how we can send logs from our EKS containers right into CloudWatch. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is that we need to ensure that our worker nodes have the appropriate configuration and authorization to be able to write the logs into CloudWatch, because the application runs inside the pods in Kubernetes, and these pods run within the EC2 instance. So for us to be able to send logs from the pods which are in the EC2 instance into CloudWatch, we need to give the EC2 instance the appropriate policy and configuration it needs to be able to write into CloudWatch logs. So the first thing we need to do is that we need to navigate into EC2. So the EC2 instance are more or less the worker nodes of our Kubernetes cluster. So we need to get into the EC2 instance, and right there in the EC2 instance we can find the one of the worker nodes here. So we'll click on that, and this will show us the particular role. So when we created the EKS cluster, this was the role that was generated for us. So we'll click on that role, and then within that role we need to add a configuration that will give EC2 the proper authorization and access to write into CloudWatch via the IAM role. So what we're going to do is, within the role, we're going to attach another policy which will give that particular access. And to do that, we'll click on Add Policy. So clicking on that role took us into the role and this particular role that is attached to the EC2 instance. And within the role, we will see the button called Attach Policy here. So we'll click on Attach Policy, and we search for the appropriate role, which will give us the appropriate policy, which will give us access to be able to write into CloudWatch. So for basic demonstration, we're going to use the CloudWatch full access policy. So this policy gives us access to CloudWatch. Okay, so from here we were able to find this policy, and we tick it here with this checkbox, and we'll click on Attach Policy. So we'll click on Attach Policy. The policy has been successfully attached into the role that is also attached into the EC2 instance. So we head over to the console where we are going to apply the configuration that we need to enable all the containers and the pods within the cluster to send logs into CloudWatch. So this is the command that will make that possible. It's a pretty long command, but what we need to understand is the information that needs to be edited here. So the name of our new cluster that we created for this that we've been working with is called Practice, and the region is EU West 1. So these two configurations are pretty much important, so that it's going to deploy it in the proper cluster and in the proper region. So the rest of it can be left, but what needs to change is the cluster name, which is this Practice here, and then the region, which is this. So when we are done, we hit the enter key and the configuration will begin. Okay, it pretty much created a lot of things, a namespace, service account, and all these things. So it's going to take a couple of minutes for it to be available. But it's the changes that we made for CloudWatch agents that has been deployed in the cluster to push logs into CloudWatch. So we'll pause the video now so we can come back later and see what has been pushed over into CloudWatch. So now that we've deployed the CloudWatch agents that will push metrics and logs into CloudWatch, let's navigate into CloudWatch and see what has been created. So we'll click on CloudWatch. Because on the recently visited, you can always scroll down to check for CloudWatch if you don't have it there under your recently visited services. So here we are in CloudWatch. We go over into Container Insight, and under Container Insight we go to Performance Monitoring, and we'll go to Performance Monitoring. We're going to find that we have the option for EKS clusters, and we're going to find our cluster here, and voila, some very interesting metrics are already been written here. So we have the CPU utilization from the cluster, the memory utilization, network, the cluster failures, there's been no failure, the disk utilization, and the number of nodes in the cluster, which you know is already 1. So this is what the metrics means for the cluster generic. Okay, I mean generally what's going on within the cluster, but we can always drill down to certain specifics. So for example, let's assume we have an Nginx deployed within this cluster and want to know what's going on with that Nginx pod or deployment within the cluster. So we can go to Resources, and under Resources we're going to find our Nginx pod running here. Okay, and if you have a lot of other pods or other deployments, you're going to find all of them here, and you can see a lot of the default pods that are running within the cluster. So we'll go straight to Nginx, and when we click on Nginx, we can see specific metrics that are specific to the Nginx pod that is running. For example, the CPU utilization so far, memory utilization so far, we can see it's barely a megabyte, and the network utilization, okay, in terms of bytes per second. and many other interesting metrics that we can find here. So with this, we can simply monitor and observe every single pod or every single deployment running within our EKS cluster. Thank you. In this demonstration, I'll be showing us how to create a CloudWatch dashboard where you can add different widgets from different other services. So the first thing we'll do is that we'll navigate into CloudWatch, and then within CloudWatch we'll see where we can create a dashboard. So actually a dashboard is an aggregate of different widgets and different dashboards from other places where we can create a dynamic combination of different kinds of dashboards. So here we are at the CloudWatch console, and we'll click on dashboards, and under dashboards we can create a new dashboard, and we're going to call this dashboard Containers Hub. Okay, Containers Hub. So this dashboard is going to contain metrics from both EKS and from ECS. We don't need to use this widget, so we'll click the cancel button. So we want to add metrics from EKS, which we already created previously, which is using the agents where we installed in the EKS cluster, and it created CPU, memory, and other metrics. So this can be very valuable if you need to combine all your dashboards, all your dashboards into a single unified dashboard for monitoring everything at a time. So we'll step right into performance monitoring under Container Insights, and here we are with the EKS cluster and the dashboards with all the metrics here. But we want to aggregate all of them. So the first thing we need to do is to add this particular metric to our dashboard. Okay, so we click add to dashboard, and we see our dashboard here as the only dashboard. If you have other dashboards, we can click on the drop down, but that's the only dashboard we have here. So I'll click on add to dashboard. So it simply takes it over into this dashboard. Now, we actually don't need all these metrics. The most important things I want to monitor is the CPU, the memory, and the network. So I can simply delete these other widgets that I really don't need. So if I come here, there's a delete here. So the fact that I deleted it from here, it doesn't mean that it's going to leave performance monitoring. Take note of that. It's just my custom dashboard that I'm trying to create, so I can remove whatever widget I don't like and add whatever widget I like. So I will also delete this and delete this. So I can click on save button. So this actually saves my dashboard. So if I want to add more metrics, let's assume I want to add the ECS, the one for ECS. So I'll go straight back into performance monitoring, and under performance monitoring I will be able to add those for the ECS cluster by navigating straight into ECS cluster, and I have the metrics of ECS all showing here. So I'm going to click on the same add to dashboard and select the particular dashboard I want to add it to, and click on add to dashboard, and this takes us right into the same dashboard. So this is the one for EKS, and this is the new ones for ECS. And I still have a bunch of things I really don't want to check out, so I can delete them. Delete this, I delete this, and I can also delete this. I also have the option to move this right up here, move it here, and move it here. Something interesting I can also do is, I mean, it's pretty confusing that you're seeing CPU memory network, CPU memory network. You really might not know which is which. So you have the option of editing the names right here. Okay. You can edit the name and call this for ECS. So you have the option of actually editing the name. You can see that right here, and you can call this same thing. Call it sorry, I think it's opposite. So this is actually ECS. This was the second one we did, and this should be EKS. EKS, yeah. So you can actually update the other widget that way, but when you are done, you need to make sure that you click on the save dashboard to be able to save your configurations. So this is how you can create a dashboard that contains widgets from different places. So you could also add widgets from other places, like if you have a dashboard of EC2 instances, you have a dashboard of RDS instances, you could use this dashboard to aggregate all the different widgets you have into a single dashboard, so it becomes a unified interface where you can see everything with a bird's eye view. Thank you.